I married Arav 2 months ago. He was charming, grounded, and emotionally steady. Everything I thought I needed after a string of disappointing relationships. What I hadn't anticipated, though, was how difficult it would be adjusting to his 22-year-old son, Ayan. I'd never been a mother, let alone a stepmother, and certainly not to someone so close to me in age. Ayan moved in with us shortly after the wedding. His mother had relocated abroad, and he needed a place to stay while finishing his final year at university. He was polite, almost too polite, always addressing me formally, keeping his distance, as though afraid to step on unfamiliar ground. I tried to make it easier. I cooked his favorite meals when I could. I'd ask about his classes, offer to drive him to campus. He responded kindly, but there was a wall between us I couldn't quite name. Still, the house felt warmer with him. There. Arav traveled often for work, sometimes gone for days. In those quiet spaces between his absences, it was just me and Ayan. Two strangers sharing a kitchen, a living room, a silence that gradually began to soften. I noticed how Ayan offered to do the dishes without being asked. How he complimented the way I organized the books in the study. His voice, always measured and thoughtful, began to sound familiar, even comforting. One evening, I found him in the kitchen making tea. "Want some?" he asked, his voice low but relaxed. It was the first time he'd initiated anything with me. I nodded, and we sat on the balcony sipping quietly, the city lights flickering in the distance. He told me about his childhood, how his parents' divorce had left him wary of relationships, how he felt like a guest in both their lives. I listened closely, surprised by how much he was willing to share. That night marked a shift. Our conversations deepened. We spoke about music, films, philosophy. Ayan was sharp, introspective, and unexpectedly funny. I began looking forward to our evenings. They filled the void that Arav's absence created, emotionally, intellectually. And somewhere between those shared silences and half-finished stories, I started noticing things I shouldn't have. The way his eyes lingered a second longer. How he always found reasons to stay in the room just a little while after our talks ended. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was just lonely. That missing my husband didn't mean I could find comfort in the presence of someone who should only be family. But late at night, when the house fell into a hush and my thoughts stretched out like shadows, I couldn't ignore the truth forming in the quiet. Something was shifting, and I didn't know yet whether to stop it or see where it led. The days began to fold into one another, each one carrying subtle shifts I couldn't quite name but felt all the same. Ayan and I had settled into an unspoken rhythm, small, quiet moments that now filled the spaces Arav left behind. He'd grown more comfortable around me, no longer masking his curiosity or holding back his laughter. There was something effortless about the way we moved through the house now, like we had found an odd kind of sync. It started with glances, fleeting, harmless. At least, that's what I told myself. His eyes would meet mine just a second too long when I passed him the salt at dinner. He'd watch me when he thought I wasn't looking, but I was. And I noticed everything. One afternoon, while I was rearranging the living room shelves, he came over to help. Our fingers touched briefly as we both reached for the same book, and instead of pulling away, his hand lingered. A current passed between us, too brief to name, too loud to ignore. I stepped back, brushing it off with a laugh, pretending not to feel the throb of something dangerously alive beneath the surface. Arav called that evening, saying he'd be gone another week for a project in Pune. I nodded through the phone call, trying not to let my disappointment show. When I hung up, I found Ayan standing by the doorway, watching me. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I nodded again, unsure if I was answering him or convincing myself. That night, we watched a movie in the living room. Something old, something romantic, The kind of film that carries more silence than dialogue. The cushions between us disappeared gradually until our shoulders brushed. I could feel his breathing, calm, steady, too composed for someone sitting this close. I didn't move away. Neither did he. When the credits rolled, I turned to find him already looking at me. "You deserve better," he whispered. I froze. The sentence dropped between us like glass shattering on marble. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. The next morning, he left early for class. No note, no message, but the echo of his voice, those 4 impossible words, stayed with me like a pulse. I replayed them while brushing my hair, folding laundry, stirring tea. You deserve better. Better than what? Than a husband who was never there? Than a marriage built on routine and polite affection? I didn't know what frightened me more, what he had said, or how much I wanted to believe him. I hadn't crossed a line, not yet. But I could see it now, thin and fragile, just ahead of me, and part of me was already leaning toward it. The power went out just after sunset. A sudden flicker, then darkness swallowed the apartment. I fumbled through drawers for candles, finally lighting 2 thick ones and placing them on the dining table. The silence felt heavier without the hum of electricity, thick, expectant. Ayan emerged from his room, phone flashlight casting long shadows along the hallway. "Storm knocked it out," he said, setting his phone aside and sitting across from me. His eyes glowed in the candlelight, the usual reserve in them replaced by something quieter, intimate. We sat without speaking for a while, the rain tapping against the windows, the flames throwing soft gold across the room. I should have gotten up. I should have gone to bed, called Arav, done anything to dilute the moment. But I didn't. Ayan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, wary of the weight in his voice. "Are you happy?" he asked. The question landed like a stone in water, rippling through everything I'd been trying to suppress. I could have lied. I could have deflected. Instead, I looked down at my hands, folded neatly in my lap, and whispered, "I don't know." His silence didn't press me. It gave me space, like he understood the layers beneath that answer. I finally met his gaze again, and what I saw there undid me. Compassion, longing, and something perilously close to love. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said softly. My throat tightened. "This isn't fair," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He stood slowly and walked around the table, his steps silent. I didn't stop him. When he sat beside me, I could feel the warmth of his presence even before he spoke again. "I think about you all the time," he said. "Not because I want to, but because I can't help it." My breath caught. I wanted to pull away, to stand up and declare this was wrong. But instead, I just sat there, shaking. He reached out, carefully brushing a strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered near my cheek. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and in that space, everything I'd been denying rushed forward, like a wave. I felt seen, I felt wanted, and I hated myself for it. When I opened my eyes, he was still watching me, waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Maybe for permission, maybe for forgiveness. "We can't do this," I said, voice breaking. "I know," he replied, "but I needed you to know." He didn't try to touch me again. He simply stood and walked away, leaving the scent of candle wax and rain in his wake. I sat there for a long time after he left, every part of me trembling from what almost happened, and what already had. A line had been crossed, not with action, but with truth, and nothing would ever feel innocent again. The days that followed moved slowly, each moment stretched by the weight of what hadn't been said aloud. Ayan avoided me, not coldly, but deliberately. He left early, came home late, and retreated into his room without so much as a glance. I didn't chase him. I didn't know how to. The distance between us was necessary, and yet it gnawed at me like a wound that refused to close. Arav returned a few days later, oblivious at first to the quiet fracture threading through the house. He greeted me with a perfunctory hug, asked about the electricity outage, and retreated to his office to catch up on emails. His presence should have brought relief, a sense of order returning, but instead, the walls felt tighter with him back. That evening, as I cleared the table after dinner, Arav stood in the doorway, watching me. "Is there something I should—" "No," he asked, tone flat. My hands paused mid-motion, a glass still in my grip. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, phone in hand. "I saw messages. On Ayan's phone. He left it charging in the living room last night." My heart thundered. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. "Do you have feelings for him?" he asked, quieter this time. I wanted to deny it, to fabricate a version of events that might keep my world from collapsing. But the truth had already spilled out between us once, and lies felt too heavy now. "It never went. Anywhere," I said, voice trembling. "But yes, I think I felt something I shouldn't have." His silence was colder than his anger might have been. He stared at me, not with rage, but with disappointment, a deep, unfamiliar sorrow that twisted my stomach. "I need time," he said finally, "to think, to breathe." He packed a bag that night and left without another word. I stood by the window long after his car disappeared into the dark. Ayan came out of his room sometime past midnight. He looked at me, eyes rimmed with regret. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never wanted to hurt anyone." "I know," I whispered. "But we did." He didn't try to make it right. There was nothing left to fix. The damage wasn't just in what had almost happened. It was in everything we'd allowed ourselves to feel. Things that couldn't be undone, only carried. The next morning, Ayan left. He said he'd stay with a friend for a while. We didn't hug. We didn't promise to talk. We just stood there in the entryway, surrounded by silence and the echo of everything we had broken. Weeks passed. I heard nothing from Arav, nothing from Ayan. The house, once so full of tension and possibility, now felt like a museum of mistakes. And yet a part of me still replayed those moments, not with pride, but with aching clarity. Because love, even when it comes in the wrong form, leaves a mark you can't forget.